joining me right now to discuss a very hot topic that is out there is Dr. Kathleen Sheehan from the Texas Tech Free Market Institute, research associate with the Texas Tech Free Market Institute, to talk about Cuba and trade with Cuba. This is something that the president brought up weeks ago and has been debated between Republicans and Republicans, Democrats and Democrats, and Democrats and Republicans. And Doctor, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm doing well.
Well, appreciate you coming on. Tell us, you've been researching this, and obviously we've had Dr. Ben Powell on from the Free Market Institute numerous times. But tell us where you're coming from on the on Cuban policy in the United States.
Well, the 5-decade embargo that the United States has had with Cuba, has not brought economic growth and freedom to the Cuban people. It has not brought them out of poverty. The daily life is a struggle for them. They only have about a $20 a salary for a month. And the regime is very much still strongly in control. Allowing for free trade between the United States and Cuba is a more effective policy to bring economic growth and freedom to the Cuban people.
Do you think, looking at this, that when you have sanctions on other countries and you compare that to what's going on in Cuba, where you're coming from, do sanctions and embargoes not work, period? Or is it one of those where we've been doing this so long on Cuba and we haven't seen any change that maybe it's time to take a new direction?
Well, free trade is always going to make the lives better for everyday people, no matter what country we're dealing with. And free trade will definitely make lives better for everyday Cubans. And, and that's the most important thing to look at. So if we begin to have free trade with the Cuban people, they're going to have greater access to American goods and services, American goods that they lack access to. Something as simple as laundry detergent is very hard to get in Cuba right now. It involves waiting in line, going to the store on, that exact precise day where they have it, or for Cuban people to go ahead and break the law and get something as simple as laundry detergent on the black market. When these items become easier to obtain through free trade, the Cuban people's lives will be better off. And that's a good policy.
Do you think that opening up trade with Cuba, ending the embargo, do you think that topples the basic dictatorship that they're living under right now?
Well, free trade has been shown to bring economic and personal liberties to the countries that embrace it. So, South Korea is an example where once they started to embrace, economic freedom, you really saw, everyday lives of the people changing there, both in economic and personal freedoms.
Let me play devil's advocate, because you've heard the arguments. This is a big debate that's going on in the United States and big time in Florida. You've probably heard some of these arguments that from senators like Marco Rubio that opening up trade just empowers the current government that is there. Do you believe that or not?
Right now, the Cuban government is able to use the United States embargo with them as a scapegoat for their own bad policies. So if we end the embargo and we begin to trade with Cuba, the Cuban government will no longer be able to use the embargo as a scapegoat. And instead, citizens are going to become more aware of Cubans' bad policies, and those bad policies are going to become more apparent. I think this will, help the everyday Cuban life.
Why haven't we seen anything open up with Cuba with other countries? Because Canadians can fly to Cuba anytime they want. Europeans can fly to Cuba. There is trade in there, and we still haven't seen any changes with Cuba. So why would the United States and just one country changing its policy, why would that change everything?
Well, the United States is, one of the closest neighbors to Cuba. And the United States also has a lot of, Cuban American citizens that can help shape ideas within Cuba as well. So if we relax some of the restrictions that we have with Cuba, for example, travel becomes much easier between the two countries. And the travel will allow for, additional exposure to American ideas on economic freedom and personal liberties. And once, you become more aware of those freedoms, the Cuban people are more likely to fight for it. And I think the close proximity that America has with Cuba, as well as a number of Cuban American citizens we have, will be very helpful for showing that.
Do you look at Cuba and maybe because everyone compares Cuba to China, basically, and say that, you look at how the U.S. treats China, we should be treating maybe Cuba the same way, or why do we treat Cuba a different way than we treat China? Are we going to see, because, while there is trade between the U.S. and China, you still have, political prisoners that are over in China. You still have, for many residents, they're not rich. There's a lot of poverty that you still see in China. How do you compare those two nations?
Well, those things are definitely concerns and things that, we would like to be aware of as we go forward with, this free trade policy. But trade provides access to everyday goods and services that are really important, and trading has been shown to help change, cultural beliefs and economic policy in countries that we're trading with.
All right. Well, it's definitely a debate that will be had in Washington D.C., and we'll see what happens. It's not a partisan issue. I mean, you've got Republicans on both sides, you got Democrats on both sides of this, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the future. I think something will change going forward, but we'll see what exactly that is. Dr. Kathleen Sheehan, Research Associate with the Texas Tech Free Market Institute. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Have a good one.